then you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Bombing, 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 she told us.
It sounded like 10 trains on a track coming towards you full speed.
We told them we're coming, we're coming.
What led us to where we are today?
They were coming to find you.
Ukraine, breadbasket of the world, now breadlines.
California is burning.
These fires get so large that there aren't enough firefighters, airplanes, helicopters.
CBS. There's this real issue of hunger. We don't want to talk about food. When you say you have to reach out to the Taliban and talk to them, how does that work as a woman?
I'm not a traitor.
You knew it was stamped top secret. You knew what that meant.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Okay, that's enough. Thanks.
I've got a lot of questions I didn't ask.
You will go to college for free!
You know, I don't feel a day older than I was yesterday.
Our lives will be forever changed, but believe me, this too shall pass.
Okay, let's go.
60 Minutes, a new season of new stories.
Analysts are cautioning patience. Those possible races too close to call.
I've been waiting to go up against this Marxist that's been telling everybody that he's a senator for Georgia.
If you can't tell us the truth about the basic facts of your life, why would we trust that you're going to tell us the truth about the issues facing us?
Georgia is one of 6 toss-up races that could decide control of the U.S. Senate, along with Pennsylvania.
John Fetterman wants to legalize all drugs and wants heroin injection sites.
This is an individual that has spent $27 million of his own money trying to buy this seat.
Good evening and welcome to a special election edition of Red and Blue Campaign 22. I'm Lilia Luciano.
And I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington.
We're joined in our coverage tonight by our CBS News colleagues Ilana Zak and Errol Barnett right here in New York. We begin in the battleground states with control of the House and Senate on the line. We're also watching numerous governors' races and state legislatures. We have correspondents and reporters across the country tonight, and we'll check in with them in just a moment.
Meanwhile, here's where things stand now. Democrats hold a slight edge in the House of Representatives, where every seat is up for grabs. The Senate is effectively tied 50-50, with Vice President Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote for Democrats. Already, more than 45 million people have voted early, with millions more expected today. The first polls close in just a couple of hours. We are waiting for the first look at exit polling. We'll also have a breakdown of the makeup of the voters this midterm season and the issues that drove them to the polls.
That's right, and we begin tonight in Battleground, Georgia, with CBS News' Nicole Killian.
Good evening, Lilia. From Herschel Walker's headquarters here in Atlanta, the Republican challenger is hoping to unseat Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock tonight. Warnock continues to argue that he thinks Herschel Walker is unfit for this job. Walker arguing to voters it's time for a change. This race has been neck and neck in recent weeks, so it's very possible this could go to a runoff. Now let's head to Jerika Duncan in Philadelphia.
That's right. I'm at the headquarters here for John Fetterman. We spoke with him earlier, his wife, in fact. They seem very excited about their prospects. They're running against Republican Mehmet Oz. Mehmet Oz obviously voted also earlier today. The U.S. Senate race here in Pennsylvania is a key race. A lot of people looking at this because it also could be the determining factor of who has power in the Senate. The Pennsylvania early ballots came in about 1 million early mail-in votes. A lot of people concerned, though, about whether or not some of those votes will be valid based on how they were filled out. There's a legal challenge happening right now. I want to go, though, to Nancy Chen, who's in New Hampshire, with more on what's happening there.
And good evening from Manchester. New Hampshire could provide an early indication of which party will end up controlling the Senate. Democratic incumbent Senator Maggie Hassan is being challenged in a toss-up race by far-right Republican candidate Dawn Bolduc, whose controversial views have included questioning the integrity of the 2020 presidential election. But many voters here are frustrated by inflation and say that they are facing the highest energy bills that New England has seen in some 25 years, and they want change. My colleague Adriana Diaz is in Wisconsin.
I'm Adriana Diaz in Neenah, Wisconsin, where they are setting up for Republican Senator Ron Johnson's watch party. Now, he's up against the current Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Here's what makes Wisconsin unique. This is the only state that went for Biden where a Republican senator is up for re-election. So Democrats are hoping they can flip a Senate seat. Now, Johnson has been leading Barnes ever so slightly in the polls, but pollsters tell us it is so close, it is a toss-up. My colleague Chris Van Cleve is in Arizona.
Here we are watching a hotly contested governor's race and a race for Senate. The Republican candidate for governor, Kari Lake, really become a rising star on the national stage for Republicans. She's a former local TV news anchor, and she has gotten a lot of attention. In fact, if in fact Republicans are successful in winning here in Arizona, they owe it largely to the momentum Kari Lake has created. You would see the candidates for statewide office often appearing with her. Blake Masters, the candidate for Senate, often acting as her opening act, if you will, at her almost made-for-TV and social media nightly rallies. Now, the Democratic senator here in Arizona, Mark Kelly, is running for his first full term. He has focused his campaign around issues like Medicare, Social Security. And our Manny Bajorquez is in Nevada following a tight race there. Manny?
That's right, Chris. A few things we're watching here. One is the weather. It's cold and blistery, blizzard conditions, I should say, blustery up in the Reno area and those rural counties around there. The question is, how might that affect voter turnout in areas that are expected to go GOP in a very tight U.S. Senate race here? But it's also windy and rainy in Clark County, which has been solidly blue. So that raises the question about voter turnout here and whether that could impact the Democrat in this race. But we're also looking at some early indications about voter turnout in Washoe County, home to Reno, where Republicans seem to be heavily outpacing Democrats at this point. But again, that's early indications, not results. Lilia?
Manny Bajorquez in Nevada, thank you. Now let's go over to our CBS News election headquarters in Times Square. We are joined by Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan and anchor of CBS News Primetime and chief political analyst John Dickerson. There's so much at stake. I can't wait to hear from both of you. What will you be watching for as the evening goes on? Margaret, let's get started with you.
We're good. Well, Lilia, there's a lot to watch, and we will be on air throughout the early morning hours covering moment by moment what we know and when we know it. But trend-wise, I think some of the big questions are, we see in our polling 79% of Americans say they feel the country's out of control. Tonight, they may exert their chance to get control. How do they do that? Who do they pick? And what is the mandate exactly that we see some of these newly elected representatives go to Washington with? CBS News is projecting that Republicans will take control of the House. But exactly by how much do they have a majority? And what are those numbers? We'll be tracking that throughout the evening. It matters because it comes back to this question of what becomes possible legislatively? Is there a chance at bipartisanship? Or are the next 2 years really just about, as President Biden recently said, his veto pen? And that the things that voters went to the ballot box to say they were upset with, which we're seeing again in our polling, is about the economy and inflation and crime, whether anything is done to chip away at that, or whether we just see more partisanship and more division. I mean, this is sort of the setting of the table for the next 2 years, certainly, of our political climate.
Concerning. What about you, John? What are you following tonight?
Well, following some of the things that Margaret's following, I mean, the first thing, of course, is just whether America can pull off an election in the tradition of the elections that have come before. We're the first election since the one that sparked January 6th. And you have, obviously, a majority of Republicans who in one form or another have denied the results of the last election. So just getting through an election with no problems and having both the winners and the losers accept the results, we'll get a taste, and we'll see tonight whether we're going to go back to elections the way they used to happen in the United States or the way they happened in the era of Donald Trump. So that's the first big thing. And then the second thing is back to Margaret's point is the signal that is sent by the election. Every election sends a signal. But how do the politicians receive that signal? Do they receive it as simply a win of kind of brute Republican strength in opposition to the White House and Democrats who control Congress? Or do they see it as a repudiation of Democrats, victories in deep blue areas where Joe Biden had big victories? And because that not only tells the Republicans what they can try to pursue in the House and Senate, if it's a big night, but it also starts a conversation, which has already really started, in the Democratic Party about how the Democratic Party has to change. The president will read that, will listen to that conversation, and many Democratic lawmakers who want to have a future in American politics will make judgments about the signal that is sent by this election. And they will either recalibrate or double down, to use a cliche I hate, on their previous position.
I mean, I'm hearing from you that there is democracy, basic rights, that there is, of course, the concerns over crime. But this is an election on affordability. There is nothing that's driving people to the polls like affordability. And Margaret, CBS News has identified one voter bloc that's known as pressured parents, parents who are worried about the economy, about inflation, about their kids' education, who were severely impacted by the pandemic and are concerned about their kids' future. How much does this group tend to influence the vote?
Well, that's part of what we're measuring, and we should know that in the weeks to come after we can really analyze some of what we learned tonight. And our Anthony Salvanto and his great team here at CBS will be doing that. Right now, they estimate that that pressured parents demographic makes up about 13% of likely voters. But frankly, American families have been under tremendous pressure. Women in particular have borne a lot of that because they do remain primary caregivers in many families. And so suburban women, always something that we track very carefully here. I mean, if we were just to begin trying to list the number of things American families have had to deal with in the last few years, it would take up the next hour. But just off the top of our heads, we've seen, in particular, Republicans harness very effectively this issue about parental rights around education. There's deep frustration among parents about the developmental declines they've seen with math and reading scores among 4th and 8th graders at these historic lows. They're frustrated about the inflation we all know so well is really cutting across the board along party lines. So it's really, I think, in some ways, the best snapshot that I can think of to get a sense of this haze we're all in this post-pandemic, if we can even call it that, state of America.
You know, we'll follow all of those groups, the pressured parents, the young and the restless, the true Trump believers. It's a different way that we have segmented the groups of voters, but each one very essential. Margaret Brennan and John Dickerson, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you.
And we are just getting started. We have an entire night of coverage ahead, so stay with us. We have Lana Zak standing by to break down the first exit polling numbers right as they come in. And we'll check in with our political contributors in Washington, here in Washington, to look at the tightest House races. You are streaming a special edition of Red and Blue.
Your right to choose is on the ballot. Your right to vote is on the ballot. Social Security and Medicare is in the ballot.
You must vote Republican in a giant red wave.
Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it! Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in our Washington, D.C. studio. Well, both party committees have been playing the expectations game for months now, hoping to drive up turnout among their voters and to win over independents. For more on this, let's bring in Danielle Alvarez. She's the communications director for the RNC. Great to see you. Thanks for being here. So what's really interesting to me is that over the past couple of weeks especially, it feels like messages on the economy and inflation are kind of baked in, and Republicans have been really focused on the issue of crime. I'm curious how you have seen that play, and does it make the difference in these final days?
Republicans have been focused on the issues that matter most to voters. And as you just mentioned, we know that that is the economy, it's kitchen table issues. We know inflation is crushing families. We know that crime is important. Creating safe communities is important. This president has created an open border where fentanyl is pouring in. And when you have an open border, every community becomes a border community. And we've also been focused on kids' education. We know that we have deficits from the pandemic. We know that 1 million students from the pandemic logged off and never logged back on. So again, the Republican Party is focused and our candidates are focused on the issues that matter most to voters. That's why I think that you will see voters, you've seen today voters turn out in droves, and that's why Republicans will pick up majorities in the House and Senate.
If Republicans do, in fact, pick up majorities, what is on the agenda? Because I've heard a lot of Republicans talk about doing investigations against the Biden administration, focusing on that. What does the party want to offer? And do you believe that they should start out with investigations, or do you think that they need to get to these issues like the economy and inflation?
This election is about a choice. We already know that the failures that the Democrats and Joe Biden have given to the American people. And Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans have put forth a commitment to America to let voters know exactly what Republicans will tackle when we win back those majorities. We know that Republicans will focus on bringing down inflation, unleashing American energy independence, will close our border, will help create safe communities, and will help ensure government accountability, help ensure parents' rights in their kids' education. We've been listening to voters for 2 years tell us the issues that are most important to them. And through the commitment to America, Leader McCarthy and House Republicans have outlined exactly what we will tackle on day one.
I know we are focused, of course, on the results of the 2022 election, but 2024 is not too far away. Donald Trump is teasing that he will likely announce a third presidential bid. We have reporting that RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel has asked him not to announce before the election. Why is that? And do you want to see, will the RNC support Donald Trump if he runs again, or are you looking at the other candidates?
I'm not privy to the conversations that our chairwoman has with the former president. I know that they connect often. She has been on the road campaigning across the country with our candidates to get out the vote. He has been incredibly helpful to candidates campaigning, hosting rallies as well to get out the vote. Everyone is united and focused on 2022. I know that 2024 seems right around the corner, but we have to get through Election Day. We know that we likely won't get results from certain states for a couple of days. And so we have to see this through the finish line. It's incredibly important to our voters. It's incredibly important to our country that we remain focused on 2022.
And a big part of waiting for those results is making sure every vote is counted before making any assumptions about it, for sure. Danielle Alvarez, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we will be joined by a representative from the DNC coming up later. Right now, CBS has been tracking 4 groups with the potential to influence this and future elections. We're calling this first group pressured parents. These are the most under pandemic, post-pandemic stress about finances, kids, and inflation. The second group is called the Trump True Believers. These are the die-hard supporters of the former president, and they generally do not believe that President Biden won in 2020, despite all the evidence that says otherwise. The next group we are calling Restoring Roe voters. These are people who prioritize abortion rights. And finally, there are the young and the restless, not the soap opera. These are young people under 30 years old who don't have kids and who are less likely to vote. But when they do head to the polls, they mostly vote Democratic. And with all 435 seats up for grabs this election cycle, the balance of power in the House is at stake. And right now, Democrats maintain narrow control of that lower chamber. CBS News estimates that the House will lose more than 20 seats, handing over the majority to the Republicans. Since before the Civil War, the House has historically shifted away from the president's party during the midterm elections. So joining me now to talk about all of this at the desk here in Washington, we have an all-star panel with us tonight and through the night watching all of these results. We have Ashley Etienne, Leslie Sanchez, and Joel Payne. Ashley is a CBS News political contributor. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and a Republican strategist. And Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Welcome to you all. Happy Election Day, night, perhaps week. We will all be talking for a while here, so let's settle in. I want to start with kind of the bigger picture of the House right now. We've got 2 Democrats and a Republican. You know the dynamics facing Democrats right now. Inflation, the economy, crime. In this closing stretch, Joel, we'll start with you. Do you feel like Democrats were speaking to these issues effectively, or are you bracing for a negative response?
I think Democrats are bracing for what the winds of history tell us is a really tough cycle for any in-party in the first 2 years of a president. I think that actually if you talk to some of the folks who are running these Democratic campaigns and committees, they'll tell you the ads they've been running have been on the economy and on abortion. Those are the issues that our coalitions are telling us are the most prescient and the most important to their voters. Obviously, we've got an interesting set of results that we're going to be watching tonight to see how that lands. But I think that Democrats feel pretty confident that their message is going to resonate with voters tonight. Obviously, you've got to compare that against what are Republicans saying. Republicans are obviously pushing these other issues, many social issues. And by the way, I think when you talk about crime, I actually think it's important to think about like COVID as a destabilizer. I think that's something that we don't consider enough, is that COVID has really destabilized the country in the last few years. So I think crime sometimes can be a stand-in for that, just as education can be a stand-in for that. The economy can be a stand-in for that as well.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, Joel, because talking to voters on the campaign trail, you just sense this anxiety, right? Sure. Anxiety about a lot of different things, and crime certainly feeds into that. Ashley, you know, I am curious, though, if Democrats could have done better at messaging on these issues, especially on the issue of crime, because it does speak to that kind of public safety element that a lot of people in the suburbs, especially those swing voters that we were all talking about in 2018 that flipped to Democrats, you know, now they're starting to show signs that they could flip over to Republicans. Have there been missed opportunities?
No, I think we should level set with American people on the issue of crime. I mean, crime's happening in red and blue states all over the country. Crime is up. I think you raise a really good point, and I think something that we're going to have to re-examine as a party at the close of the election, which is, you know, did we convey a positive, hopeful message to the American people going into the election? And I would say the answer is no, we did not. So I think to some degree, both parties have only exacerbated voters' anxieties, right, about the state of their world, reality for them. So I think that's where, I mean, our party went wrong. I think the president should have ended and closed out on a more hopeful, higher note. I've argued this morning on the morning show that I think that he should have actually wrapped his arms around Republicans more and talked more fulsome about the successes and the progress that we've actually made and the progress we've made together, both parties working together, you know, and he actually didn't do that. And I think that was a mistake, not that we didn't focus on crime, because to Joel's point, you know, I think that if you talk to any local campaign, they'll say what Washington's getting wrong is that Washington is saying we're not focused on the economy, we're not focused on crime, which they actually are. But this idea that we're not focused on progress and progress together, I think was a mistake by the president.
I mean, Leslie, to that point, I mean, Republicans can really just tap into the environment and kind of run with it. Do you think they needed to offer, you know, more of an alternative? Or in this kind of midterm environment, is it enough to just say, look at the other side, if you want change, here's what we can do?
Sure. The winds of history, to Joel's point, traditionally favor the party that's out of power. We know that. It can be a certain number of seats. People have hedged, small number, you know, low in the high teens, up in the higher 20s, you know, in terms of what the Republican wave, could it be a ripple or a wave, look like. But I think that where we miss the point collectively is to think that this is a midterm like 2018 when it's 2022. And all of that anxiety and the, you know, the stress test on our American democracy is because things are not back to normal. City centers are not feeling safe to many families. Neighborhoods are not safe. People have not financially recovered in their businesses. Children are lagging behind in school. And the list goes on, not to mention our other personal losses of family and friends. You add all that together, and that's the counter wave to what 2020 was. That's why people were looking and responding to Republican, in this state, in this case, governors like DeSantis in Florida, who came out and opened up, turned it, you know, Florida deeper shades of red, and you have a lot of Republican candidates following that message line. More stability, getting a hold of this inflation, and tackling the limited personal liberties that many families felt were infringed upon. That's what I think the context of that anxiety that we're feeling today.
Yeah, I was talking to voters in suburban Philadelphia over the weekend, and the word I heard over and over again, anxiety. Yeah. Leslie, Ashley, Joel, stick around. Don't go anywhere. You're tied to this desk with me. We have a long night ahead. Thank you all for your time. And when we return, this year's gubernatorial races will have an outsized impact on the next election cycle. We'll go to our correspondents in the Battleground states and around the country. You are streaming CBS News. Don't go anywhere.
It's unconscionable that he attacks different people, LGBTQ, women, people of color. You name it, they've been under siege. And enough is enough.
Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
Thinking about it.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
I'm thinking about it.
Primetime with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to a special edition of Red and Blue Campaign 22. I'm Lilia Luciano in New York. In addition to those Senate and House races we mentioned earlier, we're also watching very closely some crucial gubernatorial contests. Republicans currently have 28 governors to Democrats' 22. There are 36 positions that hang in the balance. Tony DeCopel is following the race in Florida for governor from Miami. Jerika Duncan. That's Tony, not Jerika.
Hey, good evening, I should say, Lilia. I'm used to saying good morning. We are at Marco Rubio headquarters, actually, in South Florida. 90 minutes until polls close. We'll find out if Marco Rubio retains his job as Senate. But as you mentioned, the governorship also on the line here. Will Ron DeSantis hold on for another term? He was in a strong position going into Election Day. But the big conversation here with some breaking news just moments ago, actually, is 2024, not 2022. Former President Donald Trump taking his first real explicit swipes against Ron DeSantis, this rising GOP star, this Florida Republican who came out of nowhere, handled COVID in such a way that made him kind of a hero nationally within his own party. The former president saying it would be a mistake for Ron DeSantis to run and warning of some unflattering things he would say about him if he decided to, said he could hurt himself badly. But let's stay with 2022 while we're living through it and go now to Adriana Diaz, who is in Neenah, Wisconsin for us.
That's right, Tony. Here in Neenah, Wisconsin, we are at the watch party for the Republican Senate candidate, but the race for governor is even closer. Governor Tony Evers, who was a Democrat who took a lot of heat for his COVID protocols, he is being challenged by Republican businessman Tim Michels. Michels comes with name recognition because his family owns one of the biggest construction companies in the state. Now, whoever wins this race could affect the 2024 race for an election for president, and that is because the Republican-controlled legislature here in Wisconsin, they have a wish list of legislation they're trying to pass that would affect elections. Things like adding more requirements for absentee ballot requests. Those have all been vetoed by the current governor, Democrat Tony Evers. If the Republican wins, that clears the way for a lot of those election changes to take place, which could have major implications for 2024. I'm going to toss it now to my dear colleague, Jerika Duncan in Pennsylvania.
Hey, Adriana, I would say always good to see you, but I can't right now. But we are standing here at the headquarters for John Fetterman. Right now it's empty, but of course there will be supporters here in the coming hours at this concert venue. Mehmet Oz, his competitor and Republican, is actually at an athletic club in Newtown, Pennsylvania, which is closer to Philadelphia. Now, of course, this is anyone's guess as to who will win this race, but here's what we do know. About 1 million people voted by mail. This is significant because it's very new. We saw what happened in 2020. This usually favors Democrats, but of course it's anyone's guess what will actually happen at the end of tonight. We also expect results we may not know the actual results here in Pennsylvania for another couple of days due to the laws and how they count the votes after the polls close. The issues that have been at the forefront of this race, the economy, crime, abortion rights, and of course a number of voters that I've spoken to since I've been here talk about the idea of preserving democracy. The election so critical here that roughly $375 million has been spent on this Pennsylvania U.S. Senate seat alone. Lilia?
An incredible amount. Jerika Duncan, thank you. That is one race that we're watching extremely closely. And as Jerika said, urging patience because we will not know the results for a while. There are hundreds of things that can impact the results of an election. So tonight, our colleague Errol Barnett is going to be tracking what we're calling the pulse of the nation. This year, there's something that we only see once in a decade, and that could be a driving factor behind who controls the next Congress. CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett is right here to explain it all. Errol, tell us all about it.
Hey there, Lilia. Great to see you. Redistricting. That could be this midterm election's wild card. It's a constitutionally mandated process, happens every decade, following the release of U.S. Census data, and it determines how many House of Representatives seats each state gains or loses based on the updated population. So take a look at this. After the 2020 census, it was determined 6 states would gain a seat. We're hoping to show that to you next. And you see here, Texas in green actually gained 2 seats, and the 7 states you see in red lost a seat. Now, if Republicans win back control of the House tonight, as we've estimated, it will be the first time in 70 years the House majority party changes in an election immediately following a redistricting. And while this is not a presidential election year, the opposition to the party in the White House typically makes gains in the midterms. We've been discussing this all night. According to the American Presidency Project, on average, the president's party loses 28 House seats and 4 Senate seats each midterm election. So this right here is a good benchmark to measure tonight's results. Lilia?
Errol Barnett, thank you. That's fascinating. And yes, something that's happening right now. Now to Caitlin in Washington, D.C.
Well, Lilia, one of those races that was impacted by redistricting is the race for New York House District 17. Republican Mike Lawler is running against the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Sean Patrick Maloney. That is the Democrat in charge of getting other Democrats elected to the House. Mike Lawler joins us now. Hi there. Good to see you. Thanks for being here on election night. So can you explain the significance of such a tight race with the person who is essentially tasked with getting more elected Democrats to the House?
Well, yeah, look, Sean Patrick Maloney has nobody to blame but himself. Earlier this year, he sent a memo to state Democrats demanding that they gerrymander New York's congressional map. They did, but ultimately, a Democrat-appointed Court of Appeals threw out the map, appointed a special master, who drew a fair map. And that's why tonight, New York Republicans have the opportunity to pick up a total of 12 to 13 seats coming out of New York and single-handedly ending the Democratic majority and ending Nancy Pelosi's reign as Speaker. Sean Patrick Maloney is the same guy who decided to run in the newly drawn 17th instead of the 18th, pushing the first openly gay black man out of Congress, Mondaire Jones. And unfortunately for Sean, in doing so, he put himself in a really bad position because 75% of this district is new to him. He only represents a quarter of the district. I represent 20% of the district in the state assembly. So he doesn't have that built-in advantage of incumbency. And about 50% of households in this district have a cop, a firefighter, a veteran, or a first responder living in it. So this district has, it's very unique. It is pure suburbia. And I feel very good about where we are with just a few hours to go.
I mean, one of the biggest issues that we've seen in this election across the country, but particularly in New York, is the issue of crime. But, Republicans have been running lots of ads on it. They've been talking about it a lot. But what is actually your plan to combat it?
Well, first of all, since cashless bail took effect in New York State on January 1st, 2020, index crimes are up 36% in New York City, and 40% of those released on non-monetary bail for felony offenses have been rearrested. Sean Maloney called this his top priority, and that's why he's losing in the polls, because voters across New York State understand that this policy was one of the stupidest pieces of legislation ever enacted. The bottom line is cashless bail needs to be repealed. Judges need discretion. New York State is the only state that does not have a dangerousness standard. It needs to enact one. Beyond that, we have to support law enforcement. We have to give them the tools that they need to do their job. You have to reinstate the anti-crime unit in New York City, whose primary responsibility is getting illegal guns off the street. You have to enforce petty crimes and quality of life crimes. There is a comprehensive approach that worked from 1993 all the way to 2019 until Democrats took control of the state legislature and upended 20 plus years of gains on public safety. We need to go back to what we were doing and get crime under control.
All right, a House race to watch certainly tonight. Mike Lawler, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of Americans have cast their priorities on those ballots. And for the latest on exit polling data, let's turn over now to Lana Zach over at the touchscreen. Lana,
hey there,
walk us through it.
Well, the polls are still open across the country, but we're starting to have some early insight into what was on the minds of voters as they cast their ballots. The first theme that emerges is the issues that matter the most across the nation. As you can see, far and away, that issue is inflation at 47%. You can see that there's actually quite a difference between that and abortion. The numbers that I have, which have been repopulated recently, show a wide gulf between inflation and abortion. The other thing I want to show you as we continue on here. Oh, look at all of this. This is election night as it happens. That the most important issue, okay, this better tracks with what we're finding. Excuse the technical glitches. 32% of Americans who are heading to the polls said that inflation was their number one issue, a 5-point divide. from abortion, which was a 27% of a driving factor for people in the polls. There's such a wide divide between these top two issues, 15 points separating that from the next closest: crime, gun policy, and immigration. Compared to the 2 years ago, family finances are far worse than they were. Some people saying it's about the same, but very few people saying it's better. So this is going to be one of those themes that we'll continue watching throughout the night as we dig into all of these results, Aaliyah.
So what's driving almost the majority of votes in all the states that we've been visiting and what we've been hearing from our colleagues. Lana, thank you. Absolutely. Coming up next, the Trump effect. The former president put his seal of approval on hundreds of Republican candidates. We'll speak with former acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney about what that means for the midterms.
Is the Trump endorsement enough to put you over the top?
I think it is. The president's support is hugely helpful because it signals which side he's on.
I'm not relying on Chuck Schumer or the president or anybody to come in here and boost me or give me money. We're doing it on our own.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.
I think of socialism as government control.
Wealth is too concentrated at the top right now.
Providing for people the things that they need is actually the world that we were supposed to live in.
Socialism didn't work in Cuba, North Korea, the Soviet Union.
Capitalism is the bedrock of the American dream.
My daughter's one of 40,000 people a year dying from lack of health care in this country. What kind of country am I living in that we're okay with this?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
The Electoral College sets up a system where every vote is not equal.
The Electoral College serves a purpose and is valuable.
Electoral votes or the popular vote?
It would be more purely democratic if we got rid of the Electoral College. But sometimes simple democracy is not the best idea.
When people on both sides feel that the system is rigged, it divides us.
538 people elect the president. That violates our principles of democratic government.
The Electoral College made George Bush an illegitimate president from the beginning. It's a terrible disease on American democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
If it's important to our nation,
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
it's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
What are the words you would use to describe the Queen?
Kind, caring, and a nice lady.
I'm here for you. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
You can see fire and rescue is up. They're doing wellness checks because people are trapped inside their homes.
We're going to be okay. We're going to make it.
It is 5:45 p.m. here on the East Coast, and time is ticking to cast your ballot. The first polls will close in a little over an hour. If you're in Vermont, Indiana, Kentucky, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, or Florida, voting stops at 7 p.m. Here's a live look now at Los Angeles, where voters are still casting their ballots in the final hours of Election Day. Polls there close at 8 p.m. California time. We're also watching a handful of races in the Midwest. In Battleground, Wisconsin, Republican Senator Ron Johnson is deadlocked in his race for re-election against Democrat Mandela Barnes. This is one of those major races that will likely determine which party will control the upper chamber. So for more on this, I want to bring in retiring Congresswoman Cheri Bustos of Illinois. She has also served as chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC. Okay, let's start with the Midwest. This is a place where there's a lot of blue-collar workers, where the candidates that we're hearing from are really talking about the economy, where some are staying away from the Democratic Party. What are the chances, and how's the messaging going there?
Well, in Illinois, I just got off the phone with our governor, J.B. Pritzker, and I believe that the Democrats will sweep all of the statewide races. So all the way from the governor's seat to U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth, she'll win re-election, all the way down to comptroller, state treasurer, secretary of state, lieutenant governor, et cetera. So I think we'll do well here. Then you've got to look congressional district by congressional district. We have a pickup opportunity in Illinois, in central Illinois, with a woman named Nikki Budzinski. That is a seat that we believe that we can flip. And then in my own seat that I've held for the last 10 years, it's a Trump district. He won in 2016 and then won by a bigger margin in 2020. And in redistricting this congressional district in central and western and northern Illinois, it gets about 10 points better. So I believe we also should be able to hang on to the seat that I've held for the last decade.
And I mean, I know that because of your district being, as you said, a Trump district, you've kind of veered away from talking about abortion too explicitly. But we know in states like Michigan, abortion is the issue that's bringing people precisely to the polls because it is on the ballot. Do you believe that, at least in the Midwest, Democrats have been leaning way too much into abortion as opposed to heightening conversations around economic issues?
Well, we saw the enthusiasm around abortion being a motivator peak, obviously, after the Supreme Court had its ruling. Now, how I've handled that issue in my part of downstate Illinois was, first of all, I don't get in arguments. I don't get into deep debates about that. I think abortion is a highly, highly personal issue. If somebody wants to seek it or needs to seek an abortion, I don't think it's a want in almost any circumstances, but needs to seek an abortion. My view on that is keep the government out of those decisions. And so if somebody is against abortion, they can be against abortion. But if somebody needs one, we shouldn't be getting in their way. We don't need to invite Uncle Sam into the doctor's room. So that's frankly how I talk about it. I don't proactively bring it up in the region that I represent. I'm a Catholic, but I am pro-choice. And I just think that's an issue that people know where they stand on it, if they're for or they're against it. And I don't think it's a motivator, but I don't think it's something that is the top motivator. Inflation and what people are spending when they go to the grocery store and buy a slab of bacon or a dozen eggs, that's got people worked up.
That's what we're hearing on the ground. Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And former President Donald Trump has been on the campaign trail, and he's teasing a big announcement next week. Trump held a final rally of the midterm season last night in Ohio. He has endorsed hundreds of candidates this cycle. So for more on this, let's bring in Mick Mulvaney. He's a former acting chief of staff to former President Donald Trump and a CBS News contributor and a former congressman. Mick, let's talk about Trump's influence on these races. If Republicans have a good night tonight, is Donald Trump to thank?
Well, I think it's certainly the case in a couple of races. I think he's endorsed about 300 candidates, and then so it doesn't really, it sort of comes out in the wash when you're talking about that many endorsements. If you want to measure the night from a success or failure standpoint from Trump's perspective, look to Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Arizona. That's it. Those are the four big ones. Those four big Senate races are where he went into the race, got heavily involved in a Republican primary, and said, that's my candidate. And his candidate won in all four of those races. If all four of those win tonight, then it'll be an unmitigated success for Trump. I think if at least two or even three of those lose tonight, it's going to be a huge failure for Trump. So, yeah, you can look at all 300 if you want to. He certainly will. But at the end of the day, the real question is, can he get those candidates across in those really, really tight races in those four states? Those are the four I'll be looking at as we go through this evening.
And in my reporting, a lot of these Republican candidates sought Trump's endorsement, and in doing so, they echoed his false claims about the 2020 election. That's a way that they secured his endorsement. We have hundreds of Republicans running for offices up and down the ballot who have questioned or denied flat out the election results of 2020. You are a former member of Congress. You are a Republican. Is that something that you would be proud of? I mean, what does it say that all of these candidates are getting traction into these offices, perhaps, by denying the election results?
It's certainly something I disagree with. I happen to believe and know that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. I think it's up to the voters in the individual races as to whether or not that's a big enough deal for them. Do I worry about the stability of the democracy going forward? Not really. And clearly, the electorate, if it does turn into a red wave tonight, isn't concerned about that as well. So it is an issue. There's no question. It pales in comparison to the issues of the economy and crime and so forth. So I know the Democrats have certainly tried to make an issue of it. It remains to be seen whether or not it determines the outcome at all tonight. It may be just another issue that the Democrats have chased, like abortion and the stability of the democracy, that doesn't work for them tonight. But again, it's the reason we have elections. It's the beauty of elections is that people actually have a chance to say. So we'll see what the electorate says tonight when they vote.
Yeah, 308 by our count have questioned the 2020 election results when people are focused on the economy and inflation. I do want to ask about former President Trump because he is teasing an announcement. I know that you have said that you wouldn't support him if he were to run again. Is that correct? And what kind of impact do you think he's having by teasing these kinds of announcements at this point when Republicans want to be focused on the election right now?
You use the right word. He loves to tease these announcements. One of my favorite announcements he's made in the past couple of months was that soon he would make a decision that would make many, many people very, very happy, which of course tells you nothing, because if he runs, a bunch of people are going to be happy. And if he doesn't run, a bunch of people are going to be happy. What you're seeing is what got Trump elected in the first place in 2016 was that he's a master manipulator of media. He knows how to use the media to get his message across. He knows the message he wants to deliver. And I think he sees a large red wave tonight at Republican victory. And if he can take advantage of that to propel some momentum for him into 2024, you could absolutely expect him to take advantage of that.
But you do not want him to run again?
Yeah, everybody asks that, and I keep wondering why people care what I care so much about. In this country, typically when somebody asks you how you vote, we tell you it's none of anybody's damn business. But I do appreciate the interest in who I'm voting for. It makes it for some discussions.
You did work for him. Well, Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much. I know we'll be talking to you later in the night. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.
And more than half of Republicans running for federal or statewide offices have raised doubts about that 2020 election. We'll take a closer look at the election deniers next. You're streaming CBS News.
If you've got election deniers serving as your governor, as your senator, as your secretary of state, as your attorney general, then democracy as we know it may not survive in Arizona. That's not an exaggeration.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem, because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided
over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
if you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We're waiting for the first polls to close. The biggest question mark on this election night, which party will control the Senate come January?
And we are checking in on the races that will tip that balance. We'll have live updates and the latest coming up at the top of the hour. You're streaming Red and Blue.
The biggest issue is women being able to have the right to do whatever we want to with our bodies.
In the situation right now with the borders being open and the fentanyl pouring in, it's just so wrong.
In our family, we support police officers, sheriffs and whatnot, and she supports our law enforcement.
You've got people who's running for these offices who said they won't accept the results. So that's what's on the ballot.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming free speech.
It's evident that there's a wave of censorship across the nation.
Angry partisan debate in schools.
College campuses have not been a place of intellectual diversity for the longest time now.
Are loud voices silencing a generation.
I don't feel comfortable speaking out. I started to realize I wasn't even discussing stuff in class. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself.
Are the kids all right? Free speech. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
My name is Omar Villafranca.
Me llamo Enrique Acevedo.
Our family at CBS is proud to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month.
The power of our community is in our diversity and identity.
My parents came from Mexico.
My mother's last name is Lopez. She's from Guatemala.
We're proud of the dreams not just of ourselves and our people, but the dreams of this nation.
We explore it all on CBS Deportes El Poder, streaming Thursday, October 13th.
What are the words you would use to describe the Queen?
Kind, caring, and a nice lady.
I'm here for you.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
You can see fire and rescue is out. They're doing wellness checks when people are trapped inside their homes.
We're gonna be okay. We're gonna make it.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Technology is baked into the DNA of our generation.
Now streaming Chasing Fame.
I like being famous. I would love for my career to launch.
Is the hunt for social media popularity an opportunity?
To get verified is one of my big goals. If I get the blue check mark, it would open a lot of doors.
Or an obsession?
I spend a lot of time looking in the mirror because I want to look perfect.
Are the kids all right? Chasing Fame, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This election is not a referendum, it's a choice. It's a choice between two very different visions of America.
The Republican Party is focused and our candidates are focused on the issues that matter most to voters.
Our backs are against the wall here. We can't take much more of Biden-Harris.
2 years ago, you all sent me to the United States Senate to just cut through the red tape and get stuff done. And that's what I've done.
Republicans need to win 5 seats to take the House and just 1 to take the Senate.
Democracy is on the line in this election.
We're not even known as the Grand Canyon state. Right now they're thinking that we're the fentanyl state.
Welcome back to our special election night edition of Red and Blue. Good evening, I'm Lilia Luciano.
And good evening, I am Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Thank you for joining us. We are joined in our coverage tonight by our CBS News colleagues Lana Zak and Errol Barnett in New York.
Some polls are beginning to close this hour in parts of Indiana and Kentucky, but those entire states plus Georgia, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia will be closing at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, making the first round of contests where voting will end. We are going to get some of our latest exit polling on some key Senate races nationwide, but we begin this hour with reports from Senate contests in battleground states. Let's start with Arizona, where Chris Van Cleve has spent a whole week following candidates and listening to voters. Chris, good evening.
The Senate race to be very close between the incumbent Democrat Mark Kelly and his Republican challenger Blake Masters. Masters has really been helped by the late campaign. In fact, if Republicans are successful in Arizona, they owe a lot of that credit to the campaign Carrie Lake has run for governor. Some things to keep in mind. The polls are open for another couple of hours here till about 7 p.m. local time. We'll get the first round of voting data about an hour after that. That'll be mostly mail-in votes and the people who had voted early during the early voting period. And then as we get into the overnight hours, the early morning hours, we'll get most of the numbers from today's vote statewide. Of course, Maricopa County, the biggest county here, that accounts for about 60% of the vote. A majority of Arizonans vote by mail, so more than 1.5 million votes had already been received before the polls even opened this morning. But there's also going to be a period where we're not going to know necessarily, if it's a close race, who may have won, because there are a bunch of mail-in votes that are just coming in today, and those won't be counted until tomorrow or later. Lilia?
Let's go, I believe, to Nancy Chen, who's in New Hampshire with a hotly contested race, or a couple. Nancy. Good evening.
Hey, good evening to you, Lilia. That's right. We are in Manchester at Senator Maggie Hassan's watch party. And this race is being seen as a potential bellwether of which party will end up controlling the Senate. Hassan, the incumbent Democrat, is being challenged in a toss-up race by Republican far-right candidate Don Bolduc. The Secretary of State's office tells me they are expecting record turnout. And with most polls closing here by 7 p.m., we could get an early picture of what Democrats are facing in other battleground states. My colleague Manuel Bojorquez is in Las Vegas.
Well, Nancy, the very tight race for U.S. Senate here between the Democratic incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto and her GOP challenger Adam Laxalt could very well come down to the economy for this reason. The rate of inflation and gas prices here in Nevada both are higher than the national average. The Republicans are trying to capitalize on that, to pin that on President Biden, his economic policies, and therefore the Democrats, like the incumbent here. On the other side, the Democrats are trying to paint inflation as a global issue and pivot to the issue of abortion access. They are also have the support of the culinary workers, that union, one of the largest and most influential here in the state. So who can really turn out their voters? Their party remains to be seen tonight. But one question when it comes to voter turnout is a winter storm that is impacting both the Reno and Las Vegas areas. Lilia?
Manny Bojorquez in Las Vegas, thank you. Control of the Senate could run through just a few states. So we wanted to take a look at exactly what is in the minds of the voters in those places. That's why Lana Zach joins us now with the latest on the exit polls. Lana, what are the issues?
Well, we've worked out some of the technical details, and there are 34 Senate seats that are up for election tonight. Republicans defending 21 seats, Democrats 14 seats. But our CBS polls show that Republicans have an advantage in the majority of those races. So it's really going to come down to 5 of these CBS News Battleground tracker states that have been rated as a virtual toss-up. These are how voters are feeling in each of those states. We're going to start now with Arizona. Interesting about Arizona, inflation, which you know nationwide is the #1 issue on voters' minds, neck and neck in Arizona with abortion. Heading over, speaking of neck and neck, to Pennsylvania. Is Fetterman healthy enough? Obviously, he had suffered a stroke earlier in the campaign season. Voters really divided there about whether or not this issue, which has come up as one of the potentially important issues driving Senate voters in Pennsylvania. In Georgia, another issue when we're talking about specific candidates, does Walker show good judgment? Only 33% of voters there saying yes, 64% of voters saying no. We're continuing to go, of course, through all of this data and figure out what's on the mind of voters. Lilia?
Lana, thank you. Let's go over now to our CBS News election headquarters in Times Square. All eyes are on former President Trump after he teased a, quote, big announcement next week. Chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa has the latest on that.
Tonight, former President Trump is in Florida at Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago, his estate there. But he's not just watching election returns alone. He is gathering his friends, longtime allies and donors at Mar-a-Lago to think through his political future. So as Republicans in Congress watch the returns, they're also keeping an eye on Trump. What is he going to do in the coming days? It was only on Monday night at a rally in Ohio that Trump teased an early entry into the 2024 presidential bid. He said next week in Florida he will make a special announcement at Mar-a-Lago. According to CBS News' latest reporting, talking to longtime Trump associates, it's evident that Trump in the coming week will likely take further steps toward a 2024 presidential bid. The question is, why is he doing this? Well, his longtime friends and allies tell us that he's moving forward right now toward a possible exploratory committee, toward even a formal announcement, because he sees other Republicans on the horizon, like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and so many other rising Republicans who might also want to run in 2024. So by getting in early, the argument goes inside Trump's inner circle, he would in effect potentially freeze the field and stop others from running, with them making the calculation, why get in if Trump is already in, and consolidating that conservative, populist, nationalist base inside the Republican Party. But Trump's machinations inside the GOP at Mar-a-Lago tonight, it doesn't make everybody happy on Capitol Hill. They feel like this is a moment for congressional Republicans, yet the Trump cloud, it looms over the entire landscape. But that's how it's been for the Republican Party going back to 2015. Trump is on the scene, wants to stay on the scene, and he doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon.
All about the timing. Robert Costa, thank you.
Well, what's a Republican to do in a state that's moving to the left? Senate candidate Joe O'Dea hopes that he has the answer, and we'll speak with him next. You're streaming a very special edition of Red and Blue.
I don't think we misled the American people, and I don't think the spending is going to make it worse.
Our economy can't take another 6 years of a rubber stamp for a spender that just blesses everything that comes across his desk, spends money hand over fist.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became a sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS Mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go! CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Of the 435 House seats up for election, 29 are considered toss-ups. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is closely following 14 of those races that could impact the balance of power in Congress. And Ed joins us now from our studio in Times Square. Ed, I can already, looking at the map, see that one of those races are the 3 Republican Latinas in southern Texas that, having spent so much time down there as you have, we know what's in the minds of voters, and that could determine how the Democratic Party addresses Latinos. Tell me about some of the other races, and why is it that these 14 are so special to you?
Right. So tonight we're tracking 49 battleground races across the country, from New England all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, down to the U.S.-Mexico border, as you mentioned, and into Florida. We called out 14 of those 49 because we think they best reflect how it is Republicans could potentially take control of the House of Representatives and with what kind of candidates. You look at somewhere like the 2nd Congressional District of Rhode Island, which encompasses parts of the Providence area. They've got a Republican running there, a guy named Alan Fung, who's a former mayor, a well-known guy who had run unsuccessfully for governor across the state before, and so has pretty good name ID. But he's a moderate who doesn't want President Trump's endorsement or support in any way, knowing that it just doesn't work in that part of the country. You go out to the suburbs of New York, the 17th Congressional District, where we spoke with Sean Patrick Maloney, who's the incumbent, also the guy in charge of getting Democrats elected to the House. But he's facing a tough re-election against Republican Mike Lawler in a suburban district that's heard a lot about crime and quality of life concerns, given that they live just about 45 minutes north of New York City here, which, of course, has had a notable uptick in all sorts of crime. And there's districts, as you mentioned, in places like Texas, the 3 along the U.S.-Mexico border, where Republicans are fielding Latina women. A first time for that, with local Republicans believing they've got a shot at winning those seats with women who are concerned about inflation, but also concerned about immigration and border security.
You know, you mentioned that Lawler race and how crime has made it so tight, but there's another race in Rhode Island that I think at this point is pretty tight, surprisingly close, something that we would not expect in that state. Can you walk us through that matchup? What is that all about?
We mentioned, we were just, yes, sorry, I got ahead of myself. In essence, look, this is the kind of district tonight you're going to hear potentially about, where Democrats have represented the area for a while, but Republicans have figured out in a year where they've been able to focus on the issues of most concern to voters and find a candidate that, you know, reflects the area and is seen as, you know, electable enough by enough people around there. This guy, Alan Fung, again, the mayor of Cranston, he's the son of Chinese immigrants. We met voters who said they remembered when he was a teenager and he would be doing his homework in the corner of the restaurant before helping out his mom and dad. And that's exactly the kind of political biography that Republicans and Democrats love to find in congressional candidates, especially new ones. It's also reflective of the fact that there are a lot of districts across the country tonight where Democrats have an open seat. Somebody is retiring and they've got to come up with somebody else to run. That's expensive to do, especially in this day and age where it's so hard for anyone to break through with their message.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you for that.
Let's turn back to control of the Senate. In Colorado, incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet is facing off a challenge against Republican businessman and first-time candidate Joe O'Dea. And Joe O'Dea joins us now. Hi, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. So I want to talk about this race in Colorado. When you talk to Republicans, they talk about a lot of competitive races, but Colorado is not top on their list. With everything going on in Republicans' favor, why isn't Colorado as competitive as some of these other states? Or do you disagree?
Well, I disagree. We've had a really good run here in Colorado. Put together a huge coalition. It's Trump supporters, it's GOP supporters, it's independents, it's disgruntled Democrats that are voting for us this year because their party has left them. And we've been working hard across Colorado. I've been to all 4 corners here in the last 2 weeks. We've got a great ground game going. People are excited about it. The polls are narrowing. I was within 2 points a week ago. They're calling it a toss-up right now. We're going to get across the finish line tonight. I'm very confident this is going to be a great win for Colorado.
I think what sets your race apart from some others is that a lot of other Republican candidates sought Trump's nomination and got it, or sought his endorsement and got it. You have not, and you have been very critical of the former president. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that has factored in to your strategy, not having his support? Is that a good thing for you?
Well, look, I'm not worried about endorsements. I'm focused on the voters here in Colorado. What Joe Biden and Michael Bennet have done to our economy, price of gas, price of groceries. We got crime at an all-time high here in Colorado. Those are the things that voters here in Colorado are talking about. That's why I got in this race. I'm just a regular guy. I'm a carpenter. Grew a construction company to 300 families here in Colorado, and they're ready to get some leadership in here from a working guy that's worried about working Americans.
And if you are elected to the Senate, what is the first priority? We've heard some Republicans say that they want to focus on investigations. We also know that the economy and inflation, as you mentioned, are top of mind for voters. What should be number one?
Well, look, I'm not worried about investigations. We need to move the United States forward, and that means getting our energy independence back. We need to grow wind, solar, nuclear, and get out of the way of oil and gas so we can get working Americans something that they can pay for, that they can afford. We've got record price on gas and diesel right now. And I got to tell you that I'll be focused on getting government out of the way so we can return to energy dominance here in the United States.
All right, Joe O'Dea in Colorado, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
And the Democratic National Committee says that it has invested an historic 8 figures in paid media ahead of Election Day. That's a big chunk of money, and it's been targeted at Black and Latino voters specifically. So joining us now for more on this is Brad Woodhouse. He is senior advisor for the DNC. Brad, good to see you. Happy Election Day. So that is a whole lot of money. That's a whole lot of money. What has it gotten you?
Well, look, what I think it has gotten us here at this 11th hour, while people are still voting, go vote, stand in line, what I think it's gotten us is a toss-up race. And no one predicted that 6 months ago. No one predicted that Democrats would be in toss-up race category, in governor's races, House races, Senate races. The assumption was that the winds were blowing against us and that Republicans would sweep everything, get 60 or 70 vote margin in the House, win tons of Senate seats. And today, we're competitive. We're in this race. And it's because this election changed. It changed from what they were hoping, a referendum on the incumbent party and the incumbent president. And now it's a choice between a party and a president that want to continue to invest and strengthen Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, and protect a woman's right to choose and pass law to codify Roe v. Wade versus a party that wants to ban abortion nationwide and wants to cut or dismantle Medicare, Social Security, the Affordable Care Act.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that messaging. I mean, we did see in June the momentum started to shift towards Democrats in the wake of that decision on Roe, but Democrats have come under some scrutiny for perhaps focusing too much on that issue when voters are saying time and again that inflation and the economy are number one. Do you think that the issue of abortion is still resonating enough to help make the difference in some of these races, or do you see it as simply a base mobilizer?
Look, I think it's resonating. I think we're seeing in the exit polls that have been reported that it is up there. It's not the number one. It's not the number one issue. But let's just be honest. Democrats believe that a woman's right to choose is fundamental, that it is absolutely a fundamental value. And it was considered by the Supreme Court for 50 years a constitutional right. So it's not like that we as Democrats could say, okay, women and girls and people that are concerned about this issue, you've got to wait your turn. We had a devastating decision at the Supreme Court. Republicans supported that. They cheered it. They're out all across the country trying to ban abortion or cut it, to 6 weeks or 5 weeks or no weeks. We had to prosecute that issue. It's fundamental to our party. But we have been talking about the economy. And of course, inflation is too high. But the only party that's done anything to address inflation in the last 2 years is the Democratic Party. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act without a single Republican vote that is lowering the cost of prescription drugs for seniors, lowering energy costs. So did we get a fair hearing? I don't know. We'll find out in a few hours. But I think we had to do both. I think we did.
Well, we will see the answer to some of those races in a few hours, as you say, and perhaps later on this week as well as results come in. Brad Woodhouse, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
More than 300 candidates, over 51% of Republican candidates on this ballot in this general election have expressed some form of doubt regarding the results of the 2020 election. CBS News Congressional correspondent Scott McFarland is at our Times Square studio with more on this. Scott.
There aren't just a few. There's an enormous number of so-called election denier candidates on the ballot in this midterm election. Not a handful, not dozens, but more than 300 federal or statewide Republican candidates CBS News categorizes as election deniers. What do we mean by that? Well, election deniers are candidates who subscribe to one or more of the following criteria. They question the legitimacy of President Biden's election. They say the 2020 election was stolen, even though some of those candidates were incumbents elected on the same ballot. They've repeated disproven claims of fraud. They signed on to that Texas lawsuit to overturn other states' electoral vote counts in 2020. They were incumbents who objected to the Electoral College count on the night of January 6, 2021, the night of the riot, or they supported certain post-2020 election audits. This includes a majority of the Republican candidates for U.S. House in the midterm elections. This includes a majority of the GOP Senate candidates, a majority of the GOP gubernatorial candidates. It even includes some Secretary of State candidates. If they prevail in the midterm elections, these election-denying Secretary of State candidates would control some of the levers of the 2024 election. And it's not just in some places. Our CBS News review found there are 48 states with either a federal or a statewide candidate on the ballot who we categorize as an election denier, including in those election battleground states, Arizona, where the candidates are at the top of the ballot for U.S. Senate, for governor, for Secretary of State. That includes in Pennsylvania, where the candidates are at the top of the ballot, including the gubernatorial candidate, Doug Mastriano, who, though uncharged, was at the Capitol January 6th. And that includes in Georgia, where you have candidates at the top of the ballot and a dozen U.S. House candidates, including any number of incumbents. One other note, the election-denying candidates have an impact on the ballot, but the Trump effect that puts so many of them on the ballot has been felt in other ways. The Trump effect was felt most prominently after the impeachment vote in early 2021, after the Capitol riot. There were 10 GOP votes to impeach Donald Trump. 8 of them are not on the ballot tonight. 4 retired, 4 lost in primary races to Trump-backed candidates, in some cases election-denying candidates. Only 2 remain. The Trump effect is strong and will be strong from start to finish on election 2022.
And we'll keep talking about it. Scott MacFarlane, thank you. Coming up, we're checking in on the closest, most hard-fought races for governor. Live updates are coming ahead as our election night coverage continues.
Kathy Hochul's been running a campaign to save Kathy Hochul.
I want to lead this state into the next 4 years and possibly beyond with that sense of optimism that we've not had here in a long time.
Brian Kemp has made Georgia the 9th highest gun violence rate state in the nation.
We've been doing good in our state because we've been saying no to Stacey Abrams.
About it. Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening. I'm thinking about it.
Primetime with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt. Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to our special election night edition of Red and Blue. I'm Lilia Luciano in New York. Millions of Americans have already cast a ballot in what has been a contentious and heated campaign season. At stake is the balance of power of Congress. Republicans appear to be in a position to gain control of the House, and control of the Senate will come down to races in states that are considered toss-ups at this point: Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Now let's go to Tony DeCopel. He's in Miami following the races in Florida. Tony, good evening.
Hey, Lilia, good evening again. We're here at Marco Rubio's election night party location. We got some country music piped in right now. The watch party will begin. There are 30 minutes left, a little bit less, to determine the fate of Marco Rubio against his challenger, Val Demings. Also, Governor Ron DeSantis, that's the other race people are talking about here. He's hoping to cap a 4-year boom period here in Florida, both for the state and for himself politically. And the big news, which we talked about last time we met this way, Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, jabbing at Ron DeSantis for the first time now, telling him with a clear message, do not run. But how about we live in 2022 while our feet are still here and go to Chris Van Cleve, 2,400 miles away in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Thanks, Tony. We are at the Arizona GOP watch party, and a lot of eyes in Arizona are on their candidate for governor, Kari Lake. She is a former local news anchor here in town who has run an aggressive MAGA Republican race. Her platform, Arizona First, has hammered Democrats on things like inflation. Phoenix has seen some of the highest in the country, as well as border security, COVID restrictions, and election integrity. Her opponent, Katie Hobbs, is the Arizona Secretary of State who ran the 2020 election, which Lake has been critical of. Hobbs has run on a campaign of protecting democracy, protecting women's rights. And it will be up to the voters here to decide. Polls are open for another couple of hours. Our colleague, Omar Villafranca, is in the Rio Grande Valley, which is being watched very closely to see if Republicans can flip seats there. He is in McAllen, Texas. Omar.
Chris, thank you. We are here in McAllen, as you mentioned. We're at Governor Greg Abbott's watch party here. One of the big races, of course, is statewide. Governor Greg Abbott going for his third term here as governor. He's been hammering his opponent. Beto O'Rourke is just an extension of President Joe Biden, hammering him on the economy and the border. One of the reasons why he chose McAllen, Texas, here in the Rio Grande Valley. Beto O'Rourke, on the other hand, is basically saying that it's time for Texas and Democrats to turn the page on Greg Abbott and move forward. He's been hammering Abbott on things from abortion to gun control and the fact that the state's grid has not been fixed. Of course, ultimately, it is up to the voters. Polls close at 7. Since Texas is a big state, there are some polls in El Paso that they close on Mountain Time an hour later, but ultimately, everything will be up to the voters. Lilia?
We'll be watching Omar Villafranca in McAllen, Texas. Thank you. From a violent war overseas to a reversal of Roe versus Wade here in the United States, 2022 has been full of history-making news stories. Many of these events are driving people to the polls and could have an impact on the results of the midterms. CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett joins us with another pulse of the nation. Errol.
Hey there, Lilia. Look, it's impossible to know the direct impact any one news event has on voters' minds, but just consider all that's happened this year 2022 began with COVID still at the forefront. Numbers peaked in January, and in February, Russia invaded Ukraine. In late spring, the issue of abortion really jolted back onto the political spotlight when the Supreme Court's draft opinion overturning Roe v. Wade was leaked. And take a look at this. A few weeks later, the issue of gun violence and gun control came to the forefront after those horrific mass shootings, once again, this time in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. June itself was a tumultuous month, from the kickoff of the January 6 hearings to gas prices hitting a record high above $5 a gallon. We also had then the official overturning of Roe v. Wade being decided by the Supreme Court. Those issues really galvanized voters in both parties. Then in August, we saw President Trump's home in Florida raided by the FBI. That kicked off weeks of coverage and discussions about the former president and classified documents. Since then, it's really been all about the economy, issues Republicans have seized on, while Democrats have seen the abortion issue lose momentum. Listen closely to this and let me show you what I mean. This is the rate of popularity of Google searches for the words abortion and inflation. You see abortion in purple there, inflation in green. Abortion reached an all-time high when Roe was overturned. The word inflation trended above abortion in recent months. What's trending today? Polling Place, Beto O'Rourke, and Maricopa County, which had some tallying issues earlier. So all of this, Lilia, on voters' minds.
That is fascinating, Errol. Interesting topics to follow and what's driving voters. Thank you so much.
And coming up, the races might be new, but the stories behind them go back decades. We're going to bring you reporters who have been following politics in key swing states for years. You're streaming Red and Blue.
The Congresswoman likes to talk about helping people. She's never passed a bill. She's never passed a single bill. She's been in Congress for over half a decade.
I know the senator, look, and I'm really disappointed in you, Marco Rubio, because I think there was a time when you did not lie in order to win.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.
I think of socialism as government control.
Wealth is too concentrated at the top right now.
Providing for people the things that they need is actually the world that we were supposed to live in.
Socialism didn't work in Cuba, North Korea, the Soviet Union.
Capitalism is the bedrock of the American dream.
My daughter's one of 40,000 people a year dying from lack of health care in this country. What kind of country am I living in that we're okay with this?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
The Electoral College sets up a system where every vote is not equal.
The Electoral College serves a purpose and is valuable.
Electoral votes or the popular vote?
It would be more purely democratic if we got rid of the Electoral College. But sometimes simple democracy is not the best idea.
When people on both sides feel that the system is rigged, it divides us.
538 people elect the president. That violates our principles of democratic government.
The Electoral College made George Bush an illegitimate president from the beginning. It's a terrible disease on American democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
If it's important to our nation.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
It's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
What are the words you would use to describe the Queen?
Kind, caring, and a nice lady.
I'm here for you. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run? Never give up and to always keep trying. You can see fire and rescue is up.
They're doing wellness checks because people are trapped inside their homes.
We're going to be okay. We're going to make it.
From coast to coast, Americans are casting their ballots in a local election that will have a massive impact nationwide. In states like Florida, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, many voters are united under similar pressures and issues like the economy, immigration, and election security, despite coming from very different parts of the country. So let's bring in Jim DeFede, investigative correspondent from our Miami affiliate, WFOR, Esme Murphy, who anchors for WCCO in Minneapolis, and John Delano, who covers money and politics for KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So let's do a lightning round, and I'll start with you, Jim. Number one thing that you're watching tonight in your state?
Well, I'm looking really at what's going to happen in the governor's race with Ron DeSantis. To be honest with you, it seems pretty clear that Governor DeSantis is going to win based on the early numbers. What we're seeing, a huge turnout by Republicans, a very depressed turnout by Democrats. But exactly how big will that be? Will it be double digits? As a reminder, he won narrowly by just 30,000 votes 4 years ago. He could be winning by 800,000 votes 4 years later, hoping to use that as a way to catapult him back into the national conversation for 2024. So exactly how much is the governor going to run up that score? That's what I'm keeping an eye on, and particularly in Miami-Dade County, which has a chance to turn from blue to red for the first time in 20 years.
Potentially could be the end of Florida as a swing state as we know it. Esme, let's go to you.
All right, well, the top issue here, the Attorney General's race. The Attorney General, the incumbent Democrat Keith Ellison, is the man who prosecuted Derek Chauvin for George Floyd's murder. He is in a very tight race. In fact, polls show him behind, in large part because he has been hit with the label that he supports defunding the police. In reality, he says he does not, but it's a complicated explanation. And in the old saying in politics, if you have to explain, you're losing. So we're following that. His opponent is a Republican who is extremely conservative and says Minnesota Democrats are to blame for a crime rate that has risen 21% over the past year.
Big issue nationwide as well. John Delano in Pennsylvania.
Well, there's only one race that everybody's focused on, and it's whether or not New Jersey's favorite son, Mehmet Oz, can defeat a stroke victim who's had a tough time recovering in John Fetterman. This is a race we're watching very closely, and I think a lot depends on two key demographic votes. We're really looking at suburban women, women outside Philadelphia, women outside of Pittsburgh, women who have made, that Mehmet Oz has made a play for on the issues of crime, essentially, and whether or not that trumps the whole issue of women's reproductive rights, abortion rights in Pennsylvania. The second issue, of course, demographic group, African Americans, absolutely key in Philadelphia. Are they coming out to vote? Will they make a difference in this election? Two very important groups, key to whether or not Pennsylvania has a Republican senator, as it has had in the last 6 years, or does it switch to a Democrat, with Fetterman giving the Democrats a chance to maintain control of the United States Senate.
All right, John Delano, Esme Murphy, and Jim DeFede with their fingers on the pulse around the country. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
New threats to election integrity mean a new way of having to cover news here at CBS News. Coming up, we'll check with our first ever Democracy Desk for a look at the security landscape of the 2022 midterms. You're streaming a special edition night of Red and Blue on election night.
Everything they experience is a direct result of Joe Biden and Senator Catherine Cortez Masto.
I think the Inflation Reduction Act was a great first start, but I do think absolutely there's more that we can do together.
In a original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgments of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
if you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
Some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. This year's midterm races have made us here at CBS News create something that we've never used before. Major Garrett anchors this panel from our Democracy Desk.
Thank you, Lilia. So we have a Democracy Desk as part of our coverage tonight. It's the first time CBS News has ever done this, and why? Because there's so much energy, much of it positive, but some of it deeply negative and disruptive about how our democracy functions, meaning how not only do we cast ballots, but how do we count them, and how believable that count actually is. And there's a great news story there to help me tell that as we watch everything tonight in this fundamental aspect of democracy. David Becker, Jeff Pegues, and Scott McFarland. David, let me start with you. As we watch the vote counts come in, let's put some baseline facts about how that process works and why, if in some states election results come in a little bit later than people expect, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, not only is there nothing wrong, that's the way we've always done it. It's very, very normal. It's what we would expect to see as our neighbors and our fellow citizens are working throughout the night to count those ballots accurately. Getting it right is more important than getting it fast. We have 10,000 different election jurisdictions all over the country, and our ballots are very complex, multiple pages, dozens of races. It's actually a miracle we can count them as fast as we do. We just might have to be patient, especially if margins are narrow, and in places where they can't start processing, for instance, mail ballots like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
And I'm glad you mentioned, David, that word processing, because it's going to be talked about a lot tonight. Help our viewers understand what processing means and why it's important in that pace of counting.
Right. So when someone goes and votes in person, either early or on Election Day, they get validated at that moment or given a ballot which they actually can put into a scanner. When someone votes by mail, as many, many millions of Americans do, and that's been something we've been doing since the Civil War, that ballot has to be validated before a ballot is then put into a scanner and counted, because we want to make sure the right person is voting. We want to make sure they are who they say they are and they haven't voted elsewhere, that they've only voted once. The process is very, very secure. We do that very, very well, but that takes time. And states like Georgia and Florida have allowed pre-processing well in advance of the elections. So they're ready to count those ballots.
Sometimes 2 and 3 weeks they can do this work.
Upon receipt.
But in some states, they can't do that until Election Day itself. That may slow down some of the results. So in that void of period of time, Jeff Pegues, when people are being like, who won? Who won? Who won? You're not telling me yet. That opens a space of volatility, does it not?
Yeah, especially in this heightened threat environment. That's what some law enforcement officials are calling it. But they are concerned about this idea of people using conspiracy theories to fuel violence. That's a major concern right now. But you have law enforcement and state and local law enforcement as well. They're working together. They're communicating.
And they're going to be watching social media platforms for those places to see where they first arise and do they spread.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, that's what they don't want to see. But they are prepared for the potential for violence. I think, post-January 6th, you have to be, given the amount of threats they're seeing. We've talked about this before against election workers. They've had, about 1,000 on record. They've launched about 11% of those 1,000 have turned into investigations. But there are election officials across the country who don't think the Department of Justice has done enough because they've only charged 8 cases. However, they say they are watching for not only threats against election workers, but also voter intimidation. I asked the Attorney General about that, and he made it clear that they are going to be monitoring that because, of course, he believes everybody should have a chance to vote.
Absolutely. Scott McFarland, I'm going to use an SAT word here, dichotomy. What strikes me is there is this sense among some Republicans that this system has some warped or fraudulent qualities to it when, as David Becker and I wrote in our most recent book, the system that we use is more verified and verifiable and transparent than ever. But there are lots of people who are running on ballots in this election who've raised some manner of questions about the integrity of this process.
Let me give an SAT word right back at you, Major. There has been a jurisprudential
That's a bigger one. That's a bigger. You win.
I took it to the next level. There have been federal judges who've said this baseless set of election claims from 2020 led to the violence January 6th and will lead to future violence if we don't stop it. With that foundation, there are 308 federal and statewide candidates who have, in some way or shape or form, denied the results of the 2020 election. That includes dozens of incumbents who claimed fraud on the very ballots upon which they were elected in 2020. This includes gubernatorial candidates. This includes Secretary of State candidates who would help administer elections if they prevail in their races tonight. And this includes any number of incumbents who on January 6, 2021, in the U.S. House voted to decertify the results even after the Capitol insurrection. They are not just a trickle or a stream of candidates, Major. They're a tidal wave. There are hundreds of them.
David, I know you don't know the answer to this question, but I want you to help our audience. They could hear Scott McFarland and say, wait a minute, people who are denying the 2020 election might win positions of Secretary of State. What are the implications of that? Help them understand.
Well, there are some really bad implications, obviously, because those positions are, in most states, the chief election official, and they will oversee elections. Now, they don't run elections. Elections are run at the county level or at the city level.
And they don't decide elections.
That's exactly right. And there are, one thing we know from the post-election 2020 period of time is that actually the courts did hold. They held the people denying the election to an evidentiary standard, another SAT word.
Show your work.
And they said, no, if you're going to say the election was stolen, you got to bring proof. And we sit here 2 years after that election, and still not one shred of proof has been brought to any court or law enforcement agency. But the damage they can do in delegitimizing an election that they're overseeing and failing to provide support for those county election officials and creating vague standards that might allow for an opening for a corrupt candidate to delegitimize the process after the election if they think they're losing, that is very, very dangerous. It's very volatile.
And Jeff, you've told us here that if we don't see you appearing very much as the night progresses,
always a good thing if you
it's
don't
a good
see me.
thing.
Yes.
But the simple truth is, those you have talked to have said it's not just tonight.
Yeah.
That in the days after that, there could be this period of volatility and this edginess about what's going on and how people might react.
Exactly, especially in those states where, the results might be contested. Those are the states you have to watch, because since 2021, a lot of the threats that law enforcement sees against, people, the poll workers, election officials, they're happening in states where the vote has been contested. And so post-midterm elections, you're going to have to watch those states, see what happens in those states. And that's what law enforcement is doing. Because as you said, those are the states where you could see the most volatility and people sort of acting out in response to the contested elections.
Scott McFarland, very quickly. So some of those who've raised questions could win. And they'll be in the awkward position, it seems to me, of saying, well, this system suddenly got better when it's the same system. Do you think that could have some kind of effect, possibly to calm down this specter of future denialism?
I don't think the risk from election denialism is limited to those tight, competitive states. It could happen in a state that's overwhelmingly blue or overwhelmingly red. That's the pernicious danger here.
Scott McFarland, Jeff Pegues, David Becker. Lilia, back to you. We'll be at the Democracy Desk all night long.
Coming up, polls are closing in just a few minutes in the first 6 states. We'll check back on the biggest races and bring you those results the second we get them. You're streaming CBS News.
Tell you from experience that midterms matter a lot.
We have to fight crime, we have to fight to keep our taxes low, and we have to do something about the border, and it has to be done now.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Free Speech.
It's evident that there's a wave of censorship across the nation.
Angry partisan debate in schools.
College campuses have not been a place of intellectual diversity for the longest time now.
Are loud voices silencing a generation.
I don't feel comfortable speaking out.
I started to realize I wasn't even discussing stuff in class. I was keeping all my thoughts to myself.
Are the kids all right? Free Speech. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
My name is Omar Villafranca.
Me llamo Enrique Acevedo.
Our family at CBS is proud to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month.
The power of our community is in our diversity and identity.
My parents came from Mexico.
My mother's last name is Lopez. She's from Guatemala.
We're proud of the dreams not just of ourselves and our people, but the dreams of this nation.
We explore it all on CBS Deportes El Poder, streaming Thursday, October 13th.
What are the words you would use to describe the Queen?
Kind, caring, and a nice lady.
I'm here for you. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
You can see fire and rescue is out. They're doing wellness checks when people are trapped inside their homes.
We're gonna be okay. We're gonna make it.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Technology is baked into the DNA of our generation.
Now streaming Chasing Fame.
I like being famous. I would love for my career to launch.
Is the hunt for social media popularity an opportunity?
To get verified is one of my big goals. If I get the blue check mark, it would open a lot of doors.
Or an obsession?
I spend a lot of time looking in the mirror because I want to look perfect.
Are the kids all right? Chasing Fame, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
My name is Omar Villafranca.
Me llamo Enrique Acevedo.
Our family at CBS is proud to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month.
The power of our community is in our diversity and identity.
My parents came from Mexico.
My mother's last name is Lopez. She's from Guatemala.
We're proud of the dreams not just of ourselves and our people, but the dreams of this nation.
We explore it all on CBS Deportes El Poder, streaming Thursday, October 13th. It is Election Day in America, and polls are open across the country.
I can't believe it. After 14 long months, the day is here.
It's the balance of Congress that's at stake today.
A lot of people are leaning too far this way, a lot of people are leaning too far that way.
We need to change, and we need to vote to change territory.
In my opinion, everything's a mess.
I will concede if I lose, but that's a big if right now.
All eyes are on Pennsylvania today.
We want